The moment I won the $1 million grant, I should have known everything would change. Success has a way of illuminating the shadows we never knew existed in our relationships, casting harsh light on the cracks we'd chosen to ignore. My name is Dylan Matthews, and this is the story of how I learned that blood ties can be both our greatest strength and our most devastating weakness. The announcement came on a crisp October morning at the Tech Future Innovation Summit in Boston. I remember standing there in my carefully chosen charcoal suit, the one Josh, my older brother, had helped me pick out just weeks before. And the recipient of this year's $1 million Breakthrough Innovation Grant is Dylan Matthews of Neurotech Solutions. The applause thundered through the conference hall, but my eyes immediately sought out Josh in the crowd. He was there, of course. He'd always been there. Through every startup failure, every midnight coding session, every moment of doubt. My brother, my mentor, my strongest advocate, or so I thought. I found him standing near the back, his expression unreadable. Even as others rushed forward to congratulate me, he remained rooted in place, his hands thrust deep in his pockets. It was such a small thing, but in retrospect, it was the first tremor before the earthquake that would shatter our relationship. "You did it, little brother," he said later at the celebration dinner, raising his glass of scotch. But something in his voice was off, a slight tremor, a hidden edge I'd never heard before. I was too caught up in the moment to really notice, too busy basking in the validation of finally proving everyone wrong about my neural interface technology. The grant would change everything. Neurotech's breakthrough in brain-computer interfaces could revolutionize how people with disabilities interact with technology. It was personal for us, or at least I thought it was. Our cousin Michael had lost his ability to communicate after a stroke, and watching him struggle had inspired both Josh and me to pursue careers in assistive technology. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings, press interviews, and congratulatory calls. Josh grew increasingly distant, canceling our traditional Sunday family dinner for the first time in years. "Just swamped with work," he texted. I didn't question it. I should have. It wasn't until Sarah, my VP of development and Josh's ex-girlfriend from college, pulled me aside after a board meeting that the first real warning bell sounded. "Dylan, there's something you should know," she said, her voice low and urgent. I overheard something at the grant committee meeting. About Josh. I brushed her off, laughing. "Josh is the reason we're here, Sarah. He's been my biggest supporter since day one." The words tasted like ash in my mouth even as I said them, because deep down, I'd started to feel the shift. The subtle withdrawal, the clipped responses, the way he'd dodge my calls only to show up at industry events where our paths would cross. The truth began to unravel during the annual Tech Innovation Award ceremony. I was there to give a speech about Neurotech's vision for the future. Josh was supposed to introduce me, a symbolic gesture acknowledging our partnership. But as I stood backstage, I overheard two committee members discussing the grant voting process. Matthew's brother was the only holdout, one of them said. Voted against his own flesh and blood. Never seen anything like it. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled backward, my prepared speech falling from my trembling hands. The pages scattered across the floor like the pieces of my shattered understanding of our relationship. Josh had voted against me. The one person I trusted most in the world had tried to prevent the biggest breakthrough of my career. When I took the stage minutes later, Josh was nowhere to be seen. His empty chair in the front row screamed louder than any words could. I delivered my speech on autopilot, my mind racing through years of memories, re-examining every interaction, every piece of advice, every moment of supposed support. That night, as I sat alone in my office overlooking the Boston skyline, I pulled up the security footage from the grant committee meeting. I hadn't wanted to believe it, but there it was, Josh's voice, clear and condemning. "While the technology shows promise, I cannot in good conscience vote to fund this project. The risks outweigh the potential benefits." My phone buzzed with a text from Josh, "We need to talk." Tomorrow, 8 a.m., my office. I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Everything I thought I knew about my relationship with my brother seemed to be unraveling. What else had I missed? What other betrayals lay buried beneath years of perceived support and brotherhood? The city lights blurred through my tears as I typed my response, yes. We certainly do. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, truth, and perhaps the final shattering of a brotherhood I'd always taken for granted. But as I sat there in the growing darkness, I realized that sometimes the price of success isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the cost to our most fundamental relationships. And this was only the beginning. The morning air bit through my coat as I stood before Josh's office building, my reflection fractured across its gleaming surface. 7:58 a.m. Each heartbeat felt like a hammer strike against my ribs, every breath drawn through lungs tight with anticipation. I'd rehearsed this confrontation 1,000 times during my sleepless night, but now, standing in the shadow of the truth, words seemed hopelessly inadequate. Josh's corner office occupied the 20th floor, a testament to his own success that I'd always admired. Now, I wondered if that admiration had blinded me to something darker lurking beneath the surface of our relationship. The elevator ride felt endless, each floor marking another moment closer to the inevitable collision of truth and perception. He was waiting for me, silhouetted against the panoramic windows, Boston Harbor a steel-gray expanse behind him. "You're early," he said, not turning around. Always were the eager little brother. The casual condescension in his tone sparked something primal within me. "Cut the big brother act, Josh. I saw the footage. I know you voted against the grant." The words hung in the air between us like shattered glass. Josh finally turned, and I was struck by how composed he looked, as if he'd been waiting for this moment, rehearsing it just as I had. "Yes, I did." The simplicity of his admission knocked the wind from my lungs. I'd expected denials, excuses, anything but this cold acknowledgement. "Why?" The question emerged as barely more than a whisper. "Because you weren't ready." He moved to his desk, each step measured and deliberate. "The technology isn't ready. But more importantly, you weren't ready for this level of responsibility." Rage surged through me, hot and clarifying. "Not ready? I've been working on this for 5 years. 5 years of 60-hour weeks, of sacrificing everything else in my life. And you were there, every step of the way, encouraging me, advising me. Was that all just an act?" "No, Dylan. That was me trying to guide you, to help you see the flaws in your approach. But you never really listened, did you?" His voice took on an edge I'd never heard before. "You took my advice when it suited you, ignored it when it didn't. You used me as a sounding board, a safety net, a convenient source of industry connections. But did you ever once consider that I might have my own vision, my own ambitions?" The accusation struck like a physical blow. "Used you? You're my brother. Everything I did, every success I achieved, I wanted to share it with you. We were supposed to be a team." Josh laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "A team? Is that what you call it when one person always leads and the other always follows? When one brother gets all the glory while the other stands in the shadows, cleaning up his messes?" "What messes?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Name one time I've failed to acknowledge your contributions, one time I've taken credit for your work." He moved suddenly, yanking open his desk drawer and pulling out a thick folder. 2 years ago, the neural interface breakthrough that put neurotech on the map. Your big moment, right? Except it was my research that made it possible. My work on signal processing that you adapted without credit." "That's not true," I protested, but memory was already unspooling like a corrupted file, revealing overlooked details, conversations I dismissed, moments when Josh had tried to speak up only to be interrupted by my enthusiasm. "And what about Sarah?" Josh's voice cracked slightly, betraying the first real emotion I'd seen. "You knew how I felt about her, knew we were trying to work things out. But you needed a VP of development, and suddenly there she was, working for you. She applied for the position. I shot back. I didn't recruit her. She chose to work with me. Of course she did. Everyone chooses you, Dylan. The golden boy, the visionary, the one who's going to change the world. While I'm just the reliable older brother, the support system, the safety net. The bitterness in his voice was staggering. Is that really how you see our relationship? As some kind of competition? No, Dylan. Competition implies both parties have a chance at winning. He turned back to the window, his shoulders rigid. I voted against the grant because your project wasn't the best option. Because Palmer Tech's proposal for accessible prosthetics had a better chance of immediate impact. Because for once, just once, I wanted to make a decision based on merit rather than loyalty. The silence that followed was deafening. Years of shared history seemed to crumble between us like sand through an hourglass. Every memory now felt tainted, every moment of perceived support cast in shadows of resentment and unspoken rivalry. You're wrong, I finally said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. Wrong about the technology, wrong about my readiness, and wrong about our relationship. But mostly, you're wrong about yourself, Josh. If you've spent all these years feeling overshadowed, that's on you, not me. He turned sharply, surprise flickering across his features. Perhaps he'd expected me to grovel, to apologize, to try to repair the breach. But something had crystallized within me during this conversation, a realization that some fractures can't be mended, only understood. The grant committee saw the potential in my work, I continued, moving toward the door. They believed in my vision. All except you. And now I have to wonder, how long have you been waiting for a chance to sabotage me? Dylan, for the first time, uncertainty crept into his voice. No. I cut him off, hand on the doorknob. You've made your position clear. But if you think this is the end of Neurotech or my vision, you're mistaken. I don't need your support anymore, Josh. And maybe I never did. As I walked out of his office, my phone buzzed with a message from Sarah, emergency board meeting called for tomorrow morning. Something about concerns over the grant approval process. Dylan, I think this is just the beginning. She was right. The confrontation with Josh wasn't an ending, it was a declaration of war. And as I stepped into the elevator, I realized that sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought against strangers, but against the very people we once trusted most. The question now wasn't whether I could succeed without Josh's support. The question was, what would he do next to try to stop me? Betrayal has a peculiar scent, like ozone before a storm, metallic and sharp, warning of devastation to come. As I sat in my darkened office that night, preparing for the emergency board meeting, that acrid taste of impending destruction coated my tongue. The city lights below pulsed like dying stars, each flicker matching the irregular rhythm of my thoughts as I dissected every moment, every interaction with Josh over the past decade. The brother I thought I knew had become a stranger wearing familiar skin. Each memory now required re-examination, like evidence at a crime scene, searching for the moment when support had curdled into resentment. When had Josh's encouragement become mere performance? When had his guidance become manipulation? My laptop screen cast a harsh glow across the scattered documents before me, performance reports, technical specifications, market analyses. All the building blocks of my dream, of Neurotech's potential. And somewhere within these papers lay the thread that would unravel Josh's attempts to destroy what I'd built. You look like hell, Sarah said, appearing in my doorway like a specter of salvation. Her presence carried the weight of our shared history, complicated now by Josh's accusations about her role in our fractured relationship. How long have you known? I asked, not looking up from the documents. About Josh's resentment, his belief that I used him. Sarah's silence stretched like a tightrope across the chasm of unspoken truths. I saw the cracks forming years ago, she finally admitted, moving to stand by the window. The way he'd flinch when people called him Dylan's brother instead of using his name. How his smile would freeze when you'd succeed where he had failed. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? Her reflection in the glass was ghostly, overlaid against the cityscape. Josh was your blind spot, Dylan. Your touchstone. The one constant you never questioned. The truth of her words carved new wounds into my already lacerated psyche. I had been blind, willfully so. Every warning sign ignored, every moment of tension dismissed as temporary stress or misunderstanding. The pattern was clear now, written in years of subtle undermining and carefully crafted doubts. The board meeting tomorrow, Sarah continued, turning to face me. Josh has been making calls. Building alliances. He's painting a picture of reckless innovation, of unchecked ambition threatening investor interests. A bitter laugh escaped me. He always did know how to play the long game. While I was focused on the technology, the pure science of it all, he was building his network, positioning himself as the voice of reason. What are you going to do? The question hung in the air like smoke, acrid with possibilities. The old Dylan, the one who had existed before Josh's betrayal, would have sought reconciliation, would have tried to understand and heal. But that version of me had died in Josh's office, immolated by the cold fire of his calculated betrayal. I'm going to learn from my enemy, I said, pulling up our company's archived emails. Josh taught me everything I know about business, about strategy. Time to put those lessons to use. Through the night, I wove together the threads of truth and perception. Every email Josh had sent praising my work to investors while privately undermining it. Every public show of support that masked a carefully placed doubt. The pattern emerged like a photo developing in darkroom chemicals, the image of a man who had spent years constructing his betrayal while maintaining the facade of brotherly devotion. But among the evidence of manipulation, I found something unexpected. Project notes from 3 years ago, when we were first developing the neural interface technology. Josh's original research had indeed been fundamental, but not in the way he claimed. His work hadn't been stolen, it had been collaborative, built through countless late-night discussions and shared breakthroughs. The reality was more complex than either of us had acknowledged. We had been a true team once, before ambition and resentment had poisoned the well of our brotherhood. The tragedy wasn't just his betrayal, it was the slow death of something that had once been genuine and powerful. Dawn broke over Boston Harbor as I finalized my strategy. The board meeting wouldn't just be about defending the grant or my leadership. It would be about exposing the truth, all of it. The good and the bad, the collaboration and the competition, the support and the sabotage. You're really going to do this? Sarah asked, watching me gather my materials. Once you start down this path, there's no going back. No chance of reconciliation. I paused, my hand resting on the leather portfolio containing years of shared history and hidden betrayals. Josh made his choice when he decided to destroy what we built together. Now I'm making mine. But as I stepped into the early morning light, a new message appeared on my phone. From an unknown number, but I recognized the writing style immediately. What you're about to present to the board, it's not the whole story. There's something you don't know about the grant committee's decision. Something that will change everything. Meet me at the old boathouse. 1 hour. The message was signed with a single letter, M. Michael, our cousin, the very person whose disability had inspired our work. The man who hadn't communicated in any form since his stroke 5 years ago. The ground shifted beneath my feet as implications cascaded through my mind. If Michael could communicate now, if he was somehow involved in this twisted game of betrayal and redemption, then everything I thought I knew about our family's story might be built on sand. The board meeting beckoned, but suddenly a new path had opened, one that promised either salvation or deeper damnation. The choice I made in the next hour would determine not just the future of neurotech, but the very foundation of truth I had built my life upon. The question was, which truth was I ready to face? The old boathouse loomed before me like a monument to forgotten promises, its weathered boards holding memories of summers long past when three boys, Josh, Michael, and I, had dreamed of changing the world. Now, as dawn painted the harbor in shades of steel and gold, those memories felt like artifacts from another life, preserved in amber but untouchable. My footsteps echoed hollow against the wooden planks as I approached. Each step carried the weight of accumulated betrayals, yet something deeper pulled me forward, a primal need to understand the full scope of this elaborate dance of deception that had become my life. The door creaked open before I could reach for it. Michael sat in his wheelchair, backlit by filtered sunlight streaming through dusty windows. The sight of him struck me like a physical blow, not because of his condition, which I had grown accustomed to over the years, but because of the clarity in his eyes. Gone was the vacant stare that had haunted our family gatherings. In its place burned an intelligence so sharp it could cut. "Hello, Dylan," he said, his voice emerging from a small device mounted to his wheelchair. "I see you got my message." The world tilted beneath my feet. 5 years of silence shattered by 2 simple words. My cousin, the inspiration for everything we built, the driving force behind Neuroteca's mission, was speaking through technology that shouldn't exist. How? The question emerged as barely more than a whisper. Michael's lips curved in a smile that held echoes of our shared childhood mischief. Prototype B713. Josh's original design, modified with your neural interface algorithms. We've been testing it in secret for the past 8 months. Every certainty I'd clung to in the past weeks crumbled like sand castles before an incoming tide. Josh's design. But he voted against the grant, against the technology. Did he? Michael's artificial voice carried an edge of challenge. Or did he vote against something else entirely? He gestured to a stack of folders on a nearby table. With trembling hands, I opened the first one, and my world shifted again. There, in precise detail, was a parallel development timeline, Josh's work on neural interface technology, running alongside but separate from Neuroteca's official research. He never stopped believing in the technology, Dylan, Michael continued. He stopped believing in the way you were implementing it. The grant proposal you submitted? It prioritized commercial applications, market penetration, profit margins. Josh saw something different, a chance to help people like me, regardless of their ability to pay. The truth hit me with the force of a tidal wave, washing away layers of assumptions and perceived betrayals. The competing proposal he voted for, Palmer Tech, was a front, Michael confirmed. A shell company Josh created to force a choice, a mirror held up to show what Neurotech had become under your leadership. He needed you to see how far you'd strayed from your original mission. Rage and understanding warred within me, each fighting for dominance. He could have told me. We could have found a way together. Could he? When was the last time you truly listened to him, Dylan? Not as your supportive big brother, not as your business advisor, but as an equal with his own vision. The question cut through my defenses like a scalpel, exposing raw truth beneath. Every ignored suggestion, every dismissed concern, every time I'd steamrolled over his objections in my rush toward success, they played through my mind like scenes from a damning documentary. Why now? I asked, my voice hoarse. Why reveal all this minutes before the board meeting? Michael's eyes held mine, unflinching. Because in 30 minutes, Josh is going to present evidence that could destroy Neuroteca's reputation and your career. He believes it's the only way to force a reset, to bring the company back to its original mission. But you have a choice. He handed me another folder, thinner than the others but somehow heavier with possibility. This is Josh's complete research, including the modified prototype I'm using. Combined with your work, it could revolutionize assisted communication technology. Not just for the wealthy, but for everyone who needs it. At what cost? The question emerged unbidden, torn from some deep place where business acumen warred with original idealism. Your pride, Michael answered simply. Your belief that you alone know best. The comfortable narrative of betrayal you've built around Josh's actions. The harbor light shifted, casting long shadows across the boathouse floor. In those shadows, I saw the shape of years wasted in competition rather than collaboration, of brothers who'd lost sight of why they'd started this journey together. My phone buzzed, a reminder that the board meeting would begin in 15 minutes. In my pocket, the damning evidence I'd gathered against Josh felt like burning coal, hot with potential destruction. "Time to choose, Dylan," Michael said, his artificial voice somehow carrying the weight of all our shared history. "Will you fight your brother, or fight beside him?" I opened my mouth to respond, but a sound at the door stopped me cold. There, silhouetted against the morning light, stood Josh, his expression a complex mixture of hope and resignation. The moment stretched between us like a bridge over troubled waters, waiting to see if it would bear weight or crumble beneath the strain of too many unspoken truths. The choice was mine, but the consequences would reshape more than just our future. They would redefine everything we'd been to each other, everything we might still become. And the clock was ticking. Time crystallized in that moment, each second a prism refracting the harsh light of truth through the spectrum of my assumptions. Josh stood before me, no longer the betrayer I'd constructed in my mind, but something far more complex, a mirror reflecting the distortions in my own character that I'd been too proud to acknowledge. The weight of Michael's revelations pressed against my chest like a stone, each breath a negotiation with reality. The familiar scent of salt air and weathered wood in the boathouse now carried notes of something else, the acrid tang of pride burning away, leaving behind the raw minerals of truth. "You could have told me," I said, my voice emerging as something unfamiliar, a sound caught between accusation and plea. "All this time, working in parallel, building something that could have been, should have been ours together." Josh's response came carefully measured, each word placed with the precision of a man who had rehearsed this moment countless times. "Could I? When was the last time you saw me as anything but a supporting character in the Dylan Matthews story?" The question lanced through my carefully constructed defenses, drawing blood. In the shadows between us, years of shared history rippled like heat waves, distorting everything I thought I knew about our relationship. "The board meeting starts in 10 minutes, Michael interrupted, his synthesized voice somehow carrying more humanity than either of us had shown in weeks. "Whatever happens next reshapes not just neurotech, but every life our technology could touch." My fingers traced the edges of the folder containing Josh's research, his true legacy, not the betrayal I'd imagined but a parallel vision of what our work could become. The papers felt alive with potential, humming with the promise of lives transformed. Not just the wealthy few, but everyone. Everyone like Michael. "Show me," I said suddenly, turning to my cousin. "Show me exactly how Josh's prototype works." Michael's fingers danced across the device's interface, and words flowed from the speaker with a fluidity I'd never achieved in my own designs. "The neural pattern recognition is based on your original algorithms," he explained, but Josh modified the processing matrix to accommodate varying levels of neural activity. "It's elegant. Adaptive. Beautiful." Each word was a chisel, carving away at the fortress of certainty I'd built around my own vision. I watched my cousin communicate with an ease I'd dreamed of providing but had somehow lost sight of in the rush toward market dominance and profit margins. "The board is waiting for a war," Josh said quietly. "They're expecting either my evidence against Neuroteca's current direction or your defense of it. But what if we gave them something else entirely?" A laugh escaped me, bitter as black coffee. "A redemption story? A touching tale of brothers reunited?" "No." His eyes met mine, hard as granite but somehow warm. "A revolution. A complete restructuring of how we approach neural interface technology. Not just a product, but a mission." The proposal hung between us like a live wire, crackling with dangerous potential. In my pocket, my phone vibrated again, another warning that time was running out. The boardroom waited, that sterile battlefield where I'd planned to wage war against my own blood. Memory surfaced unbidden, Josh and me at 12 and 14, huddled over our first circuit board, soldering dreams into reality. The smell of burning flux, the shared excitement of creation, the pure joy of building something together. When had we lost that? When had competition replaced collaboration, suspicion supplanted trust? If we do this, I said, each word torn from some deep place where pride wrestled with possibility, everything changes. The company structure, the development timeline, our entire business model. Yes. Josh's response was immediate, unflinching. We'd be betting everything on a complete pivot. The investors could walk. They could. He stepped forward, closing the physical distance even as the emotional chasm between us still gaped. Or they could see what I see, what Michael helped me see. That the real value isn't in the profit margins or market share. It's in the lives we could change. Michael's device spoke again, but this time the words carried a weight that technology alone couldn't convey. You both lost your way. But maybe that's what had to happen for you to find it again. The harbor light had shifted, painting long shadows across the boathouse floor. In those shadows, I saw the shape of possibility, not just for Neuratech, but for the brotherhood that had somehow survived my blindness and Josh's desperate gambit. My phone buzzed one final time. The board was waiting. Okay, I said, the word emerging as both surrender and declaration of war. Show me exactly what we're going to tell them. As Josh began laying out his vision, I felt something shift deep within my psychological landscape, tectonic plates of identity realigning, forming new mountains and valleys of possibility. This wasn't just about saving a company or a relationship. It was about remembering who we were before success and ambition had twisted us into strangers. The choice crystallized before me, clear as the morning light streaming through the dusty windows. It wasn't just about choosing between fighting my brother or fighting beside him. It was about choosing who I wanted to be in this story we were still writing together. The boardroom waited. But this time, when I walked through those doors, I wouldn't be alone. The boardroom stretched before us like a gladiatorial arena, its polished mahogany table reflecting the morning light like still water before a storm. Each face turned toward us held expectations of warfare, of brother against brother in a corporate death match that would feed the wolves of speculation for months to come. Instead, they found something else entirely, two brothers standing shoulder to shoulder, united by a vision bigger than our wounded pride. The weight of transformation sat heavy in my chest, a pressure both painful and exhilarating. Just hours ago, I'd walked these halls armored in righteous anger, ready to sacrifice everything we'd built on the altar of betrayal. Now, that armor lay shattered at my feet, replaced by something both stronger and more vulnerable, truth. Gentlemen, I began, my voice carrying the gravity of revelation, we've called you here today not to witness an ending, but a revolution. Josh stepped forward, and for the first time in years, I truly saw him, not as my shadow or my support, but as my equal, my brother in both blood and vision. The synchronicity of our movement spoke of years spent in perfect harmony before ambition had corrupted our rhythm. What you're about to see, he continued, represents not just a technological breakthrough, but a fundamental shift in how we approach the intersection of innovation and humanity. The doors opened again, and Michael entered, his wheelchair humming softly against the plush carpet. The board members shifted uncomfortably, their expressions a complex tableau of confusion and anticipation. They'd expected a war of corporate politics and instead found themselves witness to something far more profound. As Michael demonstrated Josh's prototype, seamlessly interfacing with a technology that married both our innovations, I watched realization dawn across faces that had grown jaded with quarterly reports and profit margins. This wasn't just another product iteration or market expansion, this was transformation made tangible, hope given digital voice. The future of Neuratech, I said, each word carrying the weight of my own metamorphosis, isn't in exclusive contracts or premium pricing. It's in accessibility, in breaking down the barriers between silence and expression, between isolation and connection. Josh unrolled the blueprints we'd spent the morning integrating, his research seamlessly woven with mine, creating something greater than either of us could have achieved alone. Our new development timeline prioritizes broad-spectrum applications, scalable implementation, and most importantly, affordability. The room erupted in precisely the chaos we'd anticipated. Questions about market share, concerns about investor confidence, warnings about competitive positioning, each objection a test of our newly forged alliance. But we were ready. Every argument they launched found itself caught in the gravitational pull of our shared conviction, transformed from obstacle to opportunity. The financial projections, research data, and market analyses we presented weren't just numbers and charts, they were proof that doing good and doing well weren't mutually exclusive. "This is madness," Harrison, our lead investor, finally exploded. "You're talking about completely restructuring a billion-dollar company based on, what? A family reunion? A crisis of conscience?" I felt rather than saw Josh tense beside me, his old instinct to step back, to let me take the lead rising like muscle memory. But this time was different. This time, we moved forward together. "Based on truth," I said, my voice carrying an authority born not of position but of purpose. "The truth that we lost sight of somewhere between our first circuit board and our last quarterly report. The truth that Michael helped us rediscover." Michael raised his hand, and the room fell silent. Through his device, he shared his story, not just of loss and isolation, but of hope restored through the combined brilliance of two brothers who had temporarily forgotten they were strongest together. The hours that followed were a blur of negotiation and demonstration, of passionate debate and careful explanation. But through it all, something extraordinary was happening, not just to Neurotech, but to Josh and me. Each time we traded off presenting, each moment we seamlessly supported each other's points, we were rebuilding something far more precious than a company. We were reconstructing the foundation of our brotherhood, stronger now for having been broken and reformed. As the sun set over Boston Harbor, casting long shadows through the boardroom windows, the final vote was called. The tension in the room had transformed from hostile to electric, charged with the potential energy of imminent change. "All in favor of the proposed restructuring and new development direction?" Hands rose slowly at first, then with gathering momentum. Even Harrison, after one last skeptical glance, raised his hand. The motion passed unanimously. Later, standing in my office, our office now, I watched Josh annotating the merged research files, his familiar handwriting a tangible symbol of our reunification. Michael sat nearby, already testing refinements to the prototype that would soon change countless lives. "You know, this is just the beginning," Josh said, looking up from his work. "The real challenges start tomorrow." I smiled, feeling the last weights of old resentment and misunderstanding fall away. "Good thing we're facing them together this time." Michael's device spoke up, carrying a note of satisfaction that no synthetic voice should have been able to convey. "About damn time you two figured it out." We laughed, a real laugh, free of the tension and calculation that had poisoned our relationship for so long. Outside, Boston's lights began to twinkle on, each one a star in the constellation of our shared future. The grant that had nearly torn us apart now seemed like destiny's instrument, forcing us to confront the fractures in our relationship so we could rebuild something stronger. Our technology would change lives, yes, but the real transformation had happened in the space between betrayal and redemption, in the crucible of truth where two brothers had rediscovered not just each other, but themselves. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new obstacles, new opportunities for growth and conflict. But we would face them as we should have all along, not as competitors, not as leader and supporter, but as brothers in every sense of the word. The sun had set on the era of individual ambition. Tomorrow would dawn on something far more powerful, a shared vision, forged in the fire of near destruction and tempered by the wisdom of hard-won truth. Together, we turned to face it.